This week's Gamer's Guide to Feminism ventures into the third wave of feminism, a much maligned, poorly understood movement that sometimes even has trouble understanding itself. A major criticism of third wave feminism is that it lacks cohesion as a movement, which means that not only is it easily maligned and exploited by opportunists, but it also involves a lot of infighting. That doesn't mean, however, that it hasn't done some very good things. Third wave feminism started in the early 1990s, sparked in part by Anita Hill's testimony during Supreme Court Judge Clarence Thomas's confirmation hearings. Though Hill's character was thoroughly assassinated at the time, history has been kinder to her, and her credibility has held up better through history than it did in the news headlines. No matter what you think of Anita Hill, the scandal launched a national conversation about sexual harassment in the workplace. Other issues included gender-based violence, the fight against abortion bans, reclaiming derogatory gendered slurs, and of course, sexual assault, most notably the organization of slut walks in response to insensitive comments made by police spokespeople that said women who don't want to get raped shouldn't dress like sluts. Alongside some dumb stuff, the third wave of feminism has been a period of legitimate expansion of academic studies of gender-related phenomenon, including Judith Butler offering gender performance theory as an alternative to gaze theory starting in 1988, and Nussbaum isolating 7 markers of sexual objectification in 1995. These are both important concepts regarding examining gender in video games, so they'll get their own videos. For now, what's important is that these academics have created clear parameters for discussion that were lacking before, so the conversation can evolve beyond a clash of subjective opinions. Third wave feminism also opened up the definitions of womanhood, seeking to better include non-white women and trans women. The defining characteristic of third wave feminism is the exact same thing that's made it so very, very weird in places. The attempt to move away from the idea that women were best served as a class to move towards treating women as individuals. In other words, third wave feminism attempts to stop asking whether a particular behavior is good or bad for all women, and instead attempts to ask whether a behavior is good or bad for a specific woman. With this shift came the rise in so-called lipstick feminism and feminist raunch culture, women who identify as feminists who don't oppose traditional beauty paradigms or sexualized depictions of women. Third-wave feminists have come to realize that it's very difficult to measure empowerment in individual women because empowerment is an intersection of factors that manifest differently in every person. Of course, there's been a backlash to this that's found fertile ground in the vulnerabilities of the video game industry. But what's been going on in video games of late isn't the main face of third wave feminism. Bands like Bikini Kill, Bratmobile, and Pussy Riot are. Pop artists like Beyonce, Nicki Minaj, and Katy Perry are. TV shows like Madam Secretary are. And of course, there's Malala. As well as celebrities turned activists like Hermione Granger, Emma Watson, and Angelina Jolie. Video games tend to attract feminist critics who have been rejected by these spheres because game developers are still running scared from any public criticism of the social impact of video games. Before we explore that, however, I want to look at a few successes of the third wave, notably in the United States. The third wave has seen the first female U.S. Attorney General, the first female Secretary of State, and the first U.S. First Lady with independent political public service duties. That First Lady was Hillary Clinton, who has also become the first viable female presidential candidate. The third wave has also seen ongoing overhauls of laws dealing with sexual assault, stalking, and sexual harassment. While these are not exclusively women's issues, the women's movement has been on the forefront of advocating for improvements. It's thanks to the work of second and third wave feminists that men can claim to be victims of sexual assault at all. The wording of the laws were so specific that rape was only a crime if a man forcibly penetrated a woman's vagina and that woman was not his wife. Any other forced sex act was not a sex-based offense, except for sodomy, which was illegal whether it was consensual or not. So just in that short list, it's clear that third-wave feminism has done some notably good things. So why does it seem so completely insane on the internet, especially when it comes to discussions of video games? Because internet video game feminism has gone to the Dworkside. For some reason, there's this false perception that women engage with video games in fundamentally different ways than men do, and that's just not so. Just like some guys who retreated to gaming to escape bullying or because they're neuroatypical or just socially awkward, many women enjoy video games for the exact same reasons. On top of this, many different types of people enjoy video games. Some are cool people, others are giant losers, and some people who like video games are just not nice people. It's commonly understood that bullying is a major factor in many gamers' past, but in the case of some gamers, the word bullying morphs into the much more charged word abuse, and abuse and victimization narratives in feminism fit neatly into the Dworkside, because the Dworkside treats victimhood like an important revolutionary state. To be a victim is to matter. But this only explains one element of the uniquely fun-destroying form of feminism that has found a home in gaming. There's also the profoundly sex-negative element that comes from the Dworkside as well. If you've been to any gaming event, it becomes clear fairly quickly that there's a larger than average portion of the population in attendance that is asexual or uncomfortable regarding sexual situations. There's a general insecurity among geeks regarding sex, sexual expression, and sexual competition. This is okay. When this reality goes to the Dworkside, however, the paradigm shifts to the idea that no one should be comfortable with glamorized depictions of sexuality. This is not okay. The right to avoid sexual content if you so choose is not the same as saying that sexual content is somehow inherently wrong. There's no denying that there was a time that gaming really overdid the sex and nudity as sales tools. The problem wasn't that there were displays of sexuality and nudity. The problem was that these displays were cynical, unhealthy, and really didn't show a lot of regard for the sexual pleasure of the women involved as well as men. But instead of creating an adult environment of healthy sexual dialogue, the gaming industry swung to the other unhealthy extreme. No sexy time for anyone ever because it might make someone uncomfortable. This misses the fact that sexually repressed situations are inherently uncomfortable for the majority of people. This, of course, leads us to the question of whether, from a feminist perspective, desexualized situations are inherently harmful instead of just boring. Some feminist writers would in fact say yes. A huge issue prior to second wave feminism is that women were discouraged from becoming aware of themselves as sexual individuals. But this meant that women were never taught how sex could be enjoyable. Many women didn't even know what an orgasm was, and that's why Cosmopolitan magazine has so many articles about sex and orgasms. The editor-in-chief of the magazine from 1965 to 1997 was second wave feminist trailblazer Helen Gurley Brown, and part of her philosophy was frank talk about sex and sexuality for women. This made Brown a target for attack from other second-wave feminists like Betty Friedan, but Cosmo's role in feminism was reevaluated in the third wave and seen as a much more positive pioneer regarding sexual expression. It's always a massive feminist fight to get people to acknowledge that women exist below the waist, that we have sexual desires, needs, and preferences, without people obsessing on this point and no longer being able to see anything else about a woman. Gaming is failing and failing hard on that point. You can't lock away feminine sexuality because it's inconvenient and not expect negative social outcomes. A past criticism of the type of sexuality found in video games has been that it's exclusively tailored towards the titillation of men. It's undeniable that there have been times that this is true. However, we have to keep in mind that men have a lot more leeway regarding sexual expression than women do, and there are a lot of sexy men in video games. Hot Ryu was a cultural phenomenon. Almost every Western RPG has the heavily muscled man character lose his clothes at some point. Quite a few video games send the message to men that masculine hypersexualization is the natural state, even though that doesn't reflect the reality of the average gamer. So the current paradigm says that a female ass is exploitation, while a male ass is a step for social justice. And that's sending the undeniable message that there's something uniquely evil and scary about female sexuality. This is no more obvious than Western video game depictions of lesbians. I'd say lesbian sexuality, except the entire problem is that the sexual component of a lesbian relationship is often avoided entirely. Again, this is the Dworkside in action. Andrea Dworkin self-identified as a lesbian, but no one can confirm that she ever had a physical relationship with a woman. And yes, this is a problem. Chaste depictions of lesbian and bisexual women perpetuate the stereotypes that women are not visually stimulated in the way that men are. The best recent research on this subject, including the work of neuropsychology researcher Meredith Chivers, indicates that it's not that women aren't visually stimulated. Chivers' work indicated increased blood flow to the lady bits while looking at pictures of both hot guys and gals. However, the correlations between physical arousal and psychological arousal are much weaker in women than they are in men. Experts are still speculating on the reasons for this profound difference between male and female sexual response, but in short, women are visually stimulated. Women just need porn with plot. Philosophy departs from science when it comes to narrative game design, however. Most of the traditions regarding depictions of sex in Western gaming come from the weird objectification of both men and women that we see in Hollywood films and television. Hollywood is what gives us the tradition of interchangeable women used as sex dolls to establish the virility of the male lead. Armed with science, we understand that this puts women off not because women don't want to watch heterosexual sex, but because there's insufficient context to these sexual encounters for a female audience to meaningfully engage. So, according to this science, if a game developer wants to attract women to their game, don't get rid of the sex. Just make the sex more meaningful and plot-driven. And yes, there are some women who love gonzo porn. I'm not denying that. I'm taking a mass market approach here. The point I'm trying to make is that the current sanitization of female secondary sex characteristics from video game environments is driven by philosophy and not science. The vast majority of women are not bothered by the presence of products made for men, as long as products designed for women are given equal profile, credibility, and clout, and attempts are made to create games that both men and women can play and enjoy together. The problem is that many games made for women end up looking like games made for children, and that's insulting to mature, confident women who want mature, confident content. This is a major part of third-wave feminism that isn't reaching game consumers because gaming's gatekeepers are only letting the Dworkside of feminism through. There's a lot more to third-wave feminism. Not all of it is good, but a lot of it is. And the first step to opening gaming up to a more positive, science-driven form of equality is to acknowledge that it exists. The Dworkside doesn't own third-wave feminism. The next videos will show how some tools developed by third-wave feminists are very useful in analyzing video game content without sucking out the fun. Until then, thanks for watching.